Today, I want you to hear this not as history, but as a personal message. Jesus, the Messiah, the greatest man who ever lived, did what he did for you. Yes, you who are watching this right now. Whether you are in America, Africa, Europe, or Asia, whether you are young or old, rich or poor, believer or doubter, every single sacrifice he made was for you. But here is the question that will pierce your heart. Why did he never marry? Why did the most compassionate, powerful, wise, and loving man in history never take a wife? Why did he never hold a woman's hand, never raise a child, never pass on his name to the next generation? If you stay with me, you will see that the answer is not only shocking, it will make you cry. Because what Jesus gave up was far greater than we imagine. Now listen closely. Right now, as you watch this video, there will be a whisper in your ear. That whisper says, "Click away. This is too heavy. Watch something else. Save this for later." But let me tell you something. That is not just distraction. That is temptation. And if you love Jesus, if you believe he gave his life for you, then say no to that whisper. You give hours of your life every day to things that don't matter. But today I ask you, can you give 1 hour, just 1 hour, to the man who gave his life for you? If your answer is yes, then type these words in the comments right now. I promise, Jesus, I love you. Say it, write it, declare it, and then stay with me until the very end. Because this story will not only reveal why Jesus never married, it will reveal why he chose you instead. Picture a quiet village in Galilee, a dusty street, children playing in the dirt, mothers carrying water jars on their shoulders, fathers teaching their sons how to fish, how to build, how to live. And in the middle of this, a boy named Jesus grows up. But his life is already differs, and his mother is young, too young. His guardian Joseph is there, but everyone in the village knows the rumors. They whisper behind closed doors, is he really Joseph's child? Or is this boy born of shame? From his very first breath, Jesus carried the weight of suspicion, of being different, of being set apart. Now stop and think about this. Many of you watching know what it feels like to be raised by a single mother. Many of you know what it feels like to have your father absent, or your family broken, or your worth questioned by others. That pain you carry, Jesus knew it too. The Messiah did not come into the world through wealth, privilege, and power. He came through poverty, hardship, and whispers. And maybe, just maybe, God allowed this so that when you cry in your loneliness, you would know he understands. But here's the question that shakes us. If Jesus grew up without the normal comfort of family, if he was already carrying rejection and sacrifice as a child, what else would he have to give up as a man? And more than that, why? Why would God send his chosen one into the world not only to die, but also to live without the joys that make life worth living? What if the cross was not his only sacrifice? What if his entire life, even the choice never to marry, was part of the price he paid for you? The story of Jesus does not begin in a palace with trumpets and crowns. It begins in the arms of a young woman, far too young for the weight of what she was carrying. Mary, poor, vulnerable, alone. Her child was not welcomed with celebration, but with suspicion. For in the eyes of her neighbors, this was not a miracle. It was scandal. A girl with a child too soon, a story too strange. People talked, people doubted, people whispered behind closed doors. Imagine her walking through the streets of Nazareth, hearing the mutters, "Is Joseph really the father? Do you believe that story about angels and visions? No, something's not right here." From the very beginning, Jesus carried the shadow of whispers. He grew up in a village where everyone thought they knew the truth, but none of them understood. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, What would it feel like to grow up in that atmosphere? What would it feel like to hear laughter outside your door, but know the laughter might be about you? What would it feel like to see other boys admired, respected, embraced as true sons, while your very identity was doubted? This is how Jesus grew up, and perhaps that is why he understands you so deeply. Because maybe you also grew up carrying questions you never asked for. Maybe your father was absent. Maybe your family was broken. Maybe your worth was questioned by others before you even had the chance to prove yourself. If you've ever felt like an outcast, Jesus knew that pain first. And here's the part most of us overlook. In that time, family was everything. Your name, your honor, your future, all tied to your family. A child without a father was vulnerable, considered incomplete. Society did not forgive easily. Yet God allowed his chosen one to be born into that reality. Why? Because he came to carry the weight of rejection. He came to understand the lonely. He came to stand with those who had no protector, no privilege, no safety. Jesus did not come to live above our pain. He came to enter it. Now imagine Jesus as a boy, watching the fathers of his village train their sons in fishing, carpentry, farming, watching other boys run to their father's arms. And Joseph was there, yes, but the questions never left. The whispers never stopped. The boy who would become the world's teacher grew up under suspicion, raised by a mother whose courage was questioned, and a father who had to defend a child the world thought was not his. Do you see the pattern? From his earliest days, Jesus was already sacrificing. He gave up the comfort of a normal family life. He gave up the respect that came with a pure reputation. And yet, he carried it quietly, with strength, with patience. Let me make this personal for you. Maybe you feel the same way. Maybe your family was broken. Maybe you never knew your father. Maybe you were raised by a single mother who did her best but carried shame she never deserved. Hear this. God sees you. He has not abandoned you. And Jesus knows your pain because he walked through it himself. But here's the haunting question. If Jesus began his life already marked by loss, already burdened by whispers, already stripped of the normal comfort of family, what else would he have to give up as he grew older? Because, as we'll see, his story is not just about dying on a cross. It is about sacrificing every comfort, every joy, every dream, long before he was nailed to wood. Now picture him at 12 years old in the temple, astounding the teachers with wisdom beyond his years. Do you think the thought never crossed their minds? He is wise, but strange. Why isn't he like other boys? Why is his life already different? At an age when other young men began preparing for marriage, Jesus was preparing for something else. At an age when others dreamed of wives and children, he dreamed of the Father's work. Already, he was walking away from the life everyone expected. Already, he was surrendering desires that most of us see as natural, necessary, and good. And here's where I turn this question to you. If you had been in his place, would you have endured it? Would you have lived under whispers and scandal your whole life? Would you have chosen loneliness so others might one day know love? Would you have given up family, legacy, and acceptance just to follow a destiny that most would never thank you for? Because that's exactly what he did. Jesus' first sacrifice was not the cross, it was the cradle. He gave up honor when he entered the world in scandal. He gave up comfort when he grew up without wealth or privilege. He gave up the safety of a normal family so that you, yes, you, could one day find family in him. But this leaves us with a question that will carry us deeper into his story. If Jesus began life without the security of a family, what did it cost him when he became a man? When marriage and children were expected of him, when loneliness pressed harder, when temptation whispered louder, what did he choose then, and why did he keep choosing sacrifice? when he could have chosen joy. The years passed, and the boy from Nazareth grew taller, stronger, wiser, but something about him always seemed different. While other boys chased each other through the dusty streets, dreaming of the day they would marry, dreaming of the families they would one day raise, Jesus carried a weight that set him apart. In a village as small as Nazareth, nothing goes unnoticed. Everyone knows your name, your family, your history. Children grow up with labels that stick for life. And Jesus' label? Mystery, whispers, questions that never went away. He's a carpenter's son, but something feels unusual about him. Why doesn't he act like the others? Why does he always seem older than his years? While his peers talked of marriage, of livestock, of business, Jesus listened more than he spoke. He studied the scriptures with unusual hunger. He slipped away to quiet places to pray. He looked beyond the hills of Galilee as if he was waiting for something the rest of the world couldn't see. In his culture, marriage was not optional. It was duty. Every man was expected to take a wife, raise children, and pass on his name. To remain unmarried was unthinkable, suspicious, almost shameful. And yet as Jesus entered his 20s, he did not seek a bride. No betrothal was arranged. No plans were made. Can you imagine the conversations behind closed doors? Why hasn't he chosen yet? What's wrong with him? A rabbi who doesn't marry. Can such a man be trusted? The pressure must have been unbearable. Every feast, every wedding, every gathering was a reminder of the path he was not taking. Every neighbor's glance was a question he refused to answer. But here is what makes his story pierce us. Jesus was not less human than us. He felt hunger. He felt pain. And yes, he felt longing. He saw the young couples of Nazareth laughing together as they carried water jars home. He saw children running to their fathers, climbing onto their laps with joy. He saw brides veiled in beauty, grooms proud to begin a legacy. And somewhere inside his human heart, he must have felt the pull. The same pull you and I feel, for love, for companionship, for belonging. What would you have done if you were him? Could you have watched others embrace the joys of life while you turned away? Could you have faced the ache of loneliness night after night, knowing you were walking a path no one would understand? For Jesus, life was never about what he wanted. It was about what he was called to do. Every choice he made was shaped by his mission. Every sacrifice he accepted was weighed against eternity. He did not refuse marriage because he despised it. He refused because his destiny left no space for it. He was not called to love one woman. He was called to love the world. And that love demanded everything. It demanded his time, his purity, his devotion, his very life. Here's the truth most of us avoid. What Jesus gave up was not easy. It was not automatic. It was not effortless. The temptation to live an ordinary life, to take a wife, to raise children, to grow old in peace, must have been strong. After all, what could be more human than the desire to be loved? But Jesus did not come for ordinary. He came for extraordinary. He turned his back on what was natural, so he could give us what was eternal. He walked away from what was expected, so he could fulfill what was divine. Let me turn this toward you. How many times have you chosen comfort instead of calling? How many times have you chosen your desires over your destiny? How many times have you given up the eternal for the sake of the temporary? We all have, every one of us. But Jesus? He walked the other road. As the years passed, his difference only grew sharper. Other men gained wives. He gained wisdom. Other men built houses. He built hope. Other men passed on their bloodlines. He prepared to pour out his blood for all. And the world didn't understand. The world couldn't understand. But here is the beauty in his sacrifice. The very loneliness he carried became the doorway for your belonging. The very legacy he gave up became the reason you have a place in God's family. The very love he withheld from one person became the love he poured out on us all. And so I leave you with this. If you were in his place, young, full of life, admired, and ready for the joys of marriage and family, would you give it all up for strangers, for people who might never love you back? Because that is what he did. That is why he grew up different. And that is why his story does not end with loneliness, but with love greater than we can ever measure. He was about 30 years old when his time came. Baptized in the Jordan River, the skies opened above him. A voice declared him chosen, a mission, now public. The quiet years in Nazareth were over, and then silence. Because immediately after that glory, he did not go to kings. He did not go to crowds. He went into the wilderness. Picture it. 40 days in the desert. No bread, no water, no shade. Only heat by day, bitter cold by night, and stones that cut his feet. His lips cracked, his skin burned, his stomach screamed in emptiness. Day after day, alone with the weight of hunger and silence, he waited. Most of us can barely fast one day without snapping in anger. 40 days, it is a death sentence. His body weakened, his bones pressed through his skin, his strength drained with every passing hour. And that is when the enemy came. The devil does not always appear with horns and fire. He comes in whispers. He comes when you are weakest. If you are truly chosen, turn these stones into bread. Bread, simple, harmless. What could be wrong with filling an empty stomach? But this was more than hunger. It was a test of trust. Would Jesus feed himself his way or trust God's way? He looked at the stone, but he saw more than bread. He saw a shortcut, a temptation to survive by his own hand instead of surrendering to God's. And he said, "Man shall not live by bread alone." The enemy was not finished. He carried him to a high place, showing him kingdoms and nations spread out like a map. "All this I will give you if you bow to me." Imagine that moment. A starving man in the wilderness, weak and tired, suddenly offered the world. Crowns, armies, cities, wealth, power. How many of us would resist? How many leaders today bow to power for far less? But Jesus saw the truth. The kingdoms offered were cheap imitations. Power gained through compromise is slavery. And he answered, "Worship God alone." But here is where most people stop the story. They talk of bread, they talk of kingdoms, but they forget the temptation no one records, the one that strikes deeper than hunger. Imagine the whisper, "Why die alone? Take a wife, have children, live a life of love. Why waste yourself on strangers who will spit in your face?" Can you feel the weight of that? After all, wasn't it natural? Weren't marriage and family gifts of God? Didn't every man long to be loved, to leave behind a name, to grow old surrounded by children? How much harder would the cross be if he had known the warmth of family first? How much sharper the nails if he had held a child of his own? Satan knew this. And that is why the temptation was not only about food or crowns, it was about love, about intimacy, about belonging. But Jesus turned even this down. He walked away from the chance at marriage, the dream of family, the longing for children, because he had already chosen a greater love. Think about it. If you were starving, wouldn't you eat? If you were poor, wouldn't you take power? If you were lonely, wouldn't you take love? Every instinct in us screams yes, but Jesus said no, because he was not living for himself. He was living for you. At the end of 40 days, the devil left him. Weakened in body but unbroken in spirit, Jesus stood victorious. The battle was not only about bread and kingdoms, it was about the deepest desires of the human heart, desires he denied so that he could fulfill a higher purpose. His victory in the wilderness was the foundation for his victory on the cross. Because if he had failed here, if he had chosen himself over us, there would be no salvation story to tell. And so I ask you, if you were offered comfort at the price of your calling, would you take it? If you were offered love at the cost of your destiny, would you give in? If you were offered the whole world, kingdoms, riches, glory, but had to turn from God, would you bow? Because Jesus was offered all this and more, and he walked away. He walked away from bread to trust in God's word. He walked away from kingdoms to build a kingdom not of this earth. He walked away from love and legacy to give his love to you instead. But the question remains, if he never married, if he never had children, if he never built a family, then who was he waiting for? Who was the bride he refused to betray? Who was the family he longed to build? The answer is coming, and it will break your heart. In first century Judea, marriage was not just normal, it was expected. Every man, especially a teacher, was expected to take a wife. To remain unmarried was rare, almost scandalous. A man without a wife was seen as incomplete, unfinished, even suspicious. And yet, Jesus, admired by crowds, respected as a rabbi, loved by his followers, never chose a bride. Imagine the questions whispered in Nazareth and beyond. Why hasn't he married yet? What's wrong with him? How can a rabbi teach us about life if he won't even live like other men? At weddings, as couples laughed and danced, people must have looked at him strangely. At family feasts, mothers may have nudged their daughters forward wondering if he would notice them, but he never did. Not because he was cold, not because he was blind, but because his mission left no room for what everyone else expected. Now pause and make this personal. Have you ever longed for something that everyone else had? Have you ever watched friends marry while you remained alone? Have you ever felt the ache of being different, of not fitting in, of being questioned for the choices you made? Jesus lived that ache every day. He saw brides radiant in beauty, veiled and carried to their husbands. He saw fathers cradling newborns, hearing their first cries. He saw families gathered around tables, laughter filling the air, and he walked away from it all. Not because he did not feel desire, but because his love was already promised, not to one, but to all. Think about what he surrendered. He gave up the warmth of a wife's embrace. He gave up the joy of holding his own children. He gave up the legacy of a family name passed through generations. He gave up the ordinary, beautiful, simple dream of a home. Most men would see this as unbearable loss, but he saw it as necessary sacrifice. The truth is both simple and devastating. He did not marry because his life was not his own. He did not marry because his mission demanded undivided devotion. He did not marry because he was preparing for a greater covenant, one far bigger than the vows of a wedding day. His bride was not waiting in Nazareth. His bride was humanity itself. And yet do not imagine that this choice was easy. Loneliness follows like a shadow. At night, when others returned to homes filled with love and laughter, Jesus often withdrew to mountains to pray, alone. Have you ever wondered if, in those moments, he thought of what he had given up? Have you ever wondered if he felt the sting of solitude, the longing for companionship he chose never to have? He knew that ache. He carried it quietly, and he bore it not for himself, but for you. So let me turn this toward you. Would you be willing to walk away from love, family, children, and joy just to fulfill a mission? Would you lay down the most natural human desires if God asked it of you? Because that is exactly what Jesus did. And here is the shocking truth. He did not marry because his love could not be contained by one woman. He did not build a family because his family would stretch beyond blood, beyond time, beyond nations. He did not leave descendants of his own body because his legacy would be a people reborn through his sacrifice. The marriage he never took on earth was replaced by a marriage greater than any the world had ever seen. So I leave you with this. If Jesus never married, if he never held a wife's hand, never raised a child, never built a home, then who is his bride? Who was he saving himself for? Who was he waiting for? The answer is about to shatter everything you thought you knew. He never chose a woman. He never raised a family. He never passed his name to a child. And yet, he never lived without love. Because the marriage he denied on earth was replaced by a covenant so much greater. All through his ministry, Jesus spoke of weddings. He told parables of a bridegroom preparing for his bride. He described the kingdom of heaven as a great wedding banquet. He spoke of lamps lit, doors opened, guests waiting for the feast. Why? Because he was hinting at a truth the world could not yet see. So his bride was not one woman, it was all of us. Think of this. If he had married, his love would have been bound to one person, one family, one house. But his heart was too vast for that. His love was meant to cross every boundary, every nation, every tribe, every soul who would come to him. Instead of one bride, he chose humanity. Instead of one family, he opened the door for the whole world. Instead of one legacy of flesh and blood, he created a legacy of spirit and faith. So what does this mean for you, sitting here watching this video? It means that every time he said no to temptation, every time he walked away from marriage, every time he chose loneliness, he was choosing you. You are not an afterthought. You are not forgotten. You are not an accident. You are the reason he refused the ordinary life others wanted for him. Because his bride is not hidden in Nazareth. His bride is the billions who would one day believe, across centuries and continents. His bride is his people. His bride is us. Marriage is a covenant, a vow of faithfulness, sealed with love. But Jesus made a covenant far greater, not sealed with rings of gold, but with blood. Not spoken under a canopy of flowers, but beneath a sky darkened at midday. Not witnessed by friends and family, but by angels and soldiers, by enemies and weeping women. On the cross, he made his vow. And it was this: I will give everything for you. My body, my blood, my life, my love. Nothing will separate me from you. That was his wedding day. But here's the part that fills the heart with both longing and hope. The wedding is not yet complete. He promised a day when the bridegroom will return for his bride. A day when the feast will begin. A day when every tear will be wiped away, every pain healed, every longing fulfilled. The wedding he never had on earth is waiting in eternity, and you are invited. But do not think this came without cost. He felt the ache of what he gave up, the empty nights, the solitude of prayer, the longing for companionship he chose never to take. And yet he endured it because he had already set his eyes on his bride. He endured it because he saw you. Think about this. Would you sacrifice marriage, children, and legacy for people who might never even thank you? Would you walk away from every joy of life just to save strangers who might spit on you, betray you, abandon you? That is what he did. And so I ask you, if he gave up all of this for you, what will you give up for him? Will you give him your time? Will you give him your loyalty? Will you give him your heart? Because his bride is not meant to be distant. His bride is meant to be faithful. Here it is. Jesus never married because his love was never meant to be small. It was never meant for one. It was meant for all. The marriage he never took was the proof of the love he had already chosen. The family he never built was the beginning of the family he would call from every corner of the earth. The legacy he never left in flesh and blood was the eternal legacy he carved into history. He gave up the joy of earthly love so he could give you the joy of eternal love. When you think of Jesus, do not only think of the cross. Think of the wedding that never happened, the children he never raised, the life he never lived, because that too was part of his sacrifice. And let this truth sink into your heart. He did not marry because he was saving himself for you. For centuries, people have struggled with the question, why did Jesus never marry? And because they could not accept his choice, they created stories. Myths, whispers passed through time, legends written in hidden books, lies repeated in dark corners, theories spread by those who could not believe a man could live without desire. In his own time, some may have mocked him quietly. He teaches holiness, but why has he not taken a wife? How can a man speak of family if he has no family of his own? In later centuries, as his followers grew in number, the question grew louder. Philosophers, skeptics, and enemies of faith asked the same thing. Wasn't he human? Didn't he feel the same longings? Surely he must have married. Surely he must have loved a woman in secret. Because to them, the idea of a man refusing marriage out of devotion to God seemed impossible, too unnatural, too threatening. And so they invented answers. Some claimed he married Mary Magdalene, that he secretly loved her, secretly wed her, secretly raised children whose descendants walk the earth. These stories have been retold in novels, in movies, in conspiracies. They capture attention because they play on our doubts, our desire for hidden knowledge, our longing for scandal. But they are not truth. They are inventions of restless imaginations. They are lies born from the discomfort of accepting his sacrifice. Because if he truly gave up love, if he truly gave up family, if he truly bore that loneliness, then the weight of what he did for us becomes unbearable. It is easier for some to believe the lie than to face the truth. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, why do these stories exist? Why do so many try to invent a marriage for Jesus? Why do they twist his life into something more ordinary, more human, more safe? The answer is shocking, because his singleness exposes us. It reveals how unwilling we are to sacrifice. It reveals how quickly we cling to comfort, love, and belonging, while he gave them all up. His celibacy is a mirror showing us our own weakness, and many cannot bear to look. Throughout history, books not recognized as scripture have tried to paint a different picture. They present fantasies of romance, of secret lives, of alternate paths. But think about this. If those stories were true, would not his followers, the ones who walked beside him, have he spoken of them? Would not history itself carry even a whisper of his wife or children? Instead, what we find is silence. Silence that speaks louder than any rumor. Silence that testifies. He never married. He never chose that path. And that silence is the sound of sacrifice. The real scandal is not that he might have loved a woman. The real scandal is that he refused to take one. In a world where marriage was honor, he chose shame. In a culture where family was legacy, he chose loneliness. In a society where every man was judged by his household, he chose to build a household not of flesh, but of faith. This was the scandal that shook his world. This is the truth that still shakes ours. So here's the question. Why are we so eager to believe the lies? Because if he did marry, if he did live like other men, then his sacrifice becomes smaller. It becomes safer. It becomes easier for us to accept. But if he truly lived without wife, without children, without comfort, then his sacrifice becomes greater than we can comprehend. And that truth demands something of us. It demands our loyalty, our devotion, our own willingness to give up what the world says we must have. So let me ask you directly, do you choose the comforting lies that make his story smaller? Or do you dare to face the truth that his life was one long sacrifice from birth to death, from cradle to cross? Because if you face that truth, you cannot walk away unchanged. And this brings us to the next stage of his story. The marriage he never took, the family he never built, the legacy he never left. All of it was not wasted. All of it was pointing to the moment of ultimate sacrifice. Because if he gave up marriage, it was to be faithful to his true bride. If he gave up family, it was to prepare a family greater than blood. If he gave up children, it was because his death would bring life to countless souls. His singleness was not a mistake. It was a signpost, a shadow pointing toward the cross. So here is the question we must now face. If Jesus gave up love, family, and legacy for us, what did it mean when he finally gave up his life? Was the cross simply the end of his story, or was it the moment when every sacrifice he had ever made came to its climax? The answer will crush your heart and then heal it. From the beginning, he gave up much: the joy of family, the warmth of marriage, the comfort of children, the respect of society. But everything he surrendered was leading to one final act. The day when he would give up not only love and legacy, but life itself. Imagine him in Gethsemane. The night heavy, the air cold, his friends asleep while he prayed in agony. He knew what was coming. He knew the nails. He knew the thorns. He knew the whip. And he prayed, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me." But he did not stop there. He ended with surrender. "Not my will, but yours." This was not weakness. It was the final proof that every sacrifice he had made until now, every moment of loneliness, every temptation resisted, every joy denied, had prepared him for this. Soon, the sound of soldiers filled the garden. The kiss of a friend turned into betrayal. Rope bound his hands. A man who had never sinned, dragged away like a criminal. At the trial, lies filled the air. False witnesses shouted, leaders sneered, the crowd screamed for blood. And through it all, he stood silent, alone. Think of this. The one who could have called down angels to defend him, who could have spoken a word and silenced his enemies, said nothing. Because he was not fighting for himself. He was surrendering for you. Then came the whip. Leather cords studded with bone and iron tore into his flesh. His back shredded, his blood poured out. Most men would have collapsed. Most would have begged for mercy, but he endured it because every lash was part of the vow he had made long ago. The vow to give everything for his bride. Hay mocked him with a crown, not of gold, but of thorns, pressed into his scalp until blood ran down his face, a purple robe thrown across torn skin. Soldiers laughed, bowed, spat in his face, and still he endured. At last he was forced to carry the wood, heavy, rough, crushing against his wounded shoulders, step by step, stumbling, falling, rising again. Crowds jeered, mothers wept, friends hid in fear. Finally, the hill, Golgotha, the place of the skull. There, they stretched out his arms, nails driven through flesh into wood. The hammer echoed like thunder. Each strike was agony, yet he did not resist. And as the cross was lifted, the weight of his body tore at the wounds, each breath a struggle. The greatest man in history, treated like the lowest criminal. But look deeper. This was not just an execution. This was a covenant. In ancient times, covenants were sealed with blood. Here, the new covenant, his marriage vow to humanity, was sealed not with rings, but with nails. Not with wine, but with his own blood. Every drop that fell was a vow. I love you. I give myself for you. I will never leave you. On the cross, he became the bridegroom, and his death became the wedding vow. And remember this, he could have chosen otherwise. He could have lived to marry. He could have raised children. He could have grown old in peace. He could have chosen love that was his alone. But he chose us instead. Every joy he denied, every temptation he resisted, every dream he surrendered, it all pointed here, to this moment, to this sacrifice. As the sky darkened, he cried out in anguish. The weight of the world's sin pressed down like suffocating chains. And then, with one final breath, he declared it finished, the vow complete, the covenant sealed, the bride claimed. Pause and let this sink in. He gave up not just his life, but the very things that make life worth living. Marriage, family, legacy, comfort, love. He refused them all so he could give his love to you. Who else would do this? Who else could? So I ask you now, if he could walk away from every human joy for you, will you walk away from sin for him? If he could endure nails and thorns for you, will you endure mockery for him? If he could die for you, will you live for him? Because this is not just history, this is your invitation. The greatest love story ever told was not written in poetry, but in blood. Not sealed with a kiss, but with a cross. Not celebrated in a palace, but on a hill of shame. And it was written for you. But here's the mystery. The story does not end with death. For if the cross was his vow, then the resurrection was his promise. If his death sealed the covenant, his rising declared that the marriage feast is still to come. And so the question becomes, what does it mean that he rose again, not as a man bound to one family, but as the bridegroom of all who believe? The answer is waiting in eternity, and it changes everything. When the cross stood empty and the tomb lay open, the question lingered. What legacy did Jesus leave behind? He had no wife to mourn him as a widow, no children to carry on his name, no bloodline to grow into a dynasty. By every standard of his culture, he left nothing. And yet, 2,000 years later, his name is spoken in every corner of the earth. His story is told in every language. His life has shaped kings, kingdoms, nations, and hearts. How could a man with no family leave behind a legacy greater than any dynasty in history? Picture his disciples in those first days after his resurrection. They had followed him, loved him, but they must have wondered, how will this mission continue? He has no children. He has no heirs. When he is gone, what happens to his teaching? In their world, legacies were passed through blood. Fathers taught sons. Sons carried names. Families built futures. But Jesus had already built something different. His legacy was not written in bloodlines, but in hearts. Not passed down through children, but through disciples. Not sealed by flesh, but by faith. Think of this. Abraham left a family that grew into a nation. David left sons who became kings. Every leader of his time measured greatness by the family they built. But Jesus left no children, and yet his family today covers the earth. From fishermen in Galilee to believers in Africa, Asia, Europe, and America, his family is made not by blood, but by faith. Every person who calls on his name becomes part of his household. His true legacy is not a line of descendants, but a living family that stretches across time. Now ask yourself this: what would have happened if he had chosen otherwise? If he had married, raised children, built a household, his legacy would have been limited. His love would have been divided. His mission would have been incomplete. But by giving up that life, he opened the door for something greater. He left behind not a son or daughter, but a movement. Not a house in Nazareth, but a kingdom without walls. Not a name carried by bloodline, but a name carried by billions. And yet, don't overlook the cost. He never heard a child call him father. He never passed on his trade to a son. He never held a daughter's hand on her wedding day. He never grew old surrounded by grandchildren. All the joys of family he surrendered, and he surrendered them for you. So let me turn this question to you. What kind of legacy are you living for? A name carved on stone, a family tree that will fade, a career that will be forgotten? Or are you living for something greater, a legacy that stretches into eternity? Because his life shows us this. Legacy is not about what you leave in flesh, but what you leave in faith. Look around. The man who left no children now has more followers than any king. The man who died without heirs now has a family so vast no one can count it. The man who left no house now has a kingdom that will never fall. This is the paradox of his life. By giving up family, he gave birth to the greatest family the world has ever known. And here is the question that cuts to your soul. Would you give up the life you dreamed of so others could live? Would you lay down marriage, family, and comfort for the sake of strangers? Would you choose loneliness so generations after you could know hope? Because that is what he did. So here's the truth. You are his legacy. Every prayer you whisper, every act of faith, every moment you choose love over hate, you are carrying his name. You are proof that his sacrifice was not in vain. He may not have left children in Nazareth, but he has left children across nations, across centuries. And you are one of them. And yet the story does not end with legacy. Because what he gave up on earth points to what is still waiting in eternity. If he never had a wedding here, then where is the wedding feast he promised? If he never held a bride's hand in Nazareth, then who will he hold in eternity? If he never gave his love to one, then when will he finally take his bride? The answer is coming, and it will open your eyes to the love story behind all of history. If Jesus never took a wife on earth, if he never raised children, if he never built a household, then what was he waiting for? The answer is hidden in his words, in his parables, in his promises. He was waiting for a wedding, but not the kind his neighbors expected. Again and again, he spoke of a bridegroom. The kingdom of heaven is like 10 virgins waiting for the bridegroom. The kingdom is like a king preparing a wedding banquet. When the bridegroom is taken away, then they will fast. Why this language? Why these images? Because he was revealing something extraordinary. He was the bridegroom, and his people, those who would follow him, love him, believe in him, were his bride. Earthly marriages are beautiful. A man promises to love one woman, to be faithful until death, but his marriage is greater. He promises to love all who come to him, to be faithful not until death, but beyond death, to give his life not for one, but for many. He gave up the joy of an earthly bride so that he could claim the eternal joy of a heavenly bride. And that bride is you. He told his disciples, "I go to prepare a place for you." Like a groom preparing a home for his bride, he ascended not to leave us, but to make ready the wedding feast of eternity. And one day, when the appointed hour comes, he will return. The heavens will open. The bridegroom will come for his bride. And the greatest wedding in history will begin. No palace on earth could hold it. No banquet table could stretch far enough. No music could capture the joy. This will be the wedding feast of eternity. The day when the one who never married on earth unites forever with his people in heaven. But here's what makes it piercing. He has been waiting. Every generation that passes, every century, every soul who chooses him, all are being gathered for that day. And in the waiting, his love has never wavered. He has remained faithful, though many betray him. He has remained patient, though many forget him. He has remained devoted, though many mock him. This is not the love of a man bound to time. This is the love of eternity. So what does this mean for you, watching this video right now? It means you are not forgotten. It means you are not unloved. It means that every tear, every trial, every lonely night has meaning, because the bridegroom is coming. And the question is, will you be ready? In his parables, he warned that not all would be prepared. Some would let their lamps run out of oil. Some would ignore the invitation to the feast. Some would be distracted by the world, too busy to notice when the bridegroom arrived. And so the challenge is this: will you keep your lamp burning? Will you keep your heart faithful? Will you answer the invitation when it comes? Because the wedding he refused on earth is nothing compared to the wedding he is preparing in heaven, and you are invited. Think about what this means. He gave up the warmth of a wife's embrace so he could embrace you. He gave up the joy of children so he could call you his child. He gave up the legacy of a household so he could build an eternal house with you inside it. And he has promised, nothing will separate you from his love. Not hunger, not pain, not death, not time. This is the vow of the eternal bridegroom. So I ask you again, if he is waiting for you, will you wait for him? If he has kept himself faithful for eternity, will you stay faithful in this short life? If he is preparing a wedding feast beyond imagination, will you keep your lamp lit for his return? Because his love is not a story, it is not a myth, it is not a distant dream, it is a covenant, waiting for the final day when heaven and earth are joined forever. Imagine it. A banquet hall stretching farther than the eye can see, tables laden with food no king has ever tasted, crowds clothed in white, faces shining with joy, music rising like thunder, yet soft as a whisper. And at the center, the bridegroom, no longer mocked, no longer bleeding, no longer alone, but radiant, victorious, smiling as he welcomes his bride. And in that moment, you will understand why he never married on earth. Because he was saving himself for this, for you, for all who would believe. We've walked through his life. We've seen the sacrifices he made, from the cradle to the cross, from his singleness to his suffering. And now the question is no longer about him. It is about you. Think of what he gave up. He gave up the honor of a family name. He gave up the joy of a wife's embrace. He gave up the laughter of children calling him father. He gave up the legacy of a home, a household, a bloodline. He gave up even his life, nailed to wood, crowned with thorns, abandoned by friends, and he did it all for you. Not for a nation, not for an idea, not for history, for you. So here is the question that should pierce your soul. If he gave up everything for you, what will you give up for him? Will you give him your heart? Will you give him your loyalty? Will you give him your time? An hour each day, a prayer in the morning, a word of thanks in the night? Or will you give him nothing while living for yourself? Because love demands a response. A bride cannot ignore her groom. The tragedy of our age is not that people hate him, it is that they forget him. We give our time to screens, to money, to desires, to distractions. We promise we are too busy. We promise we will come back later. But he waits, patient, faithful, watching as his bride wanders away. And one day, the trumpet will sound, the doors will close, the banquet will begin. The question is, will you be inside or outside? So I ask you directly, yes, you watching this video, if tonight was the night the bridegroom returned, would you be ready? Would your lamp be lit? Would your heart be faithful? Or would you be caught unprepared, distracted by the world, too busy for the one who gave everything for you? Do not let the devil's whisper take this from you. Even now, a voice says, "This is emotional. This is too heavy." Click away. Say no. Say yes to Jesus. Say yes to the bridegroom who gave up everything for you. Type it now in the comments. I promise, Jesus, I love you. Make it public. Make it real. Make it your vow. Because the story does not end in sorrow. It ends in joy. The cross was agony, but the resurrection was victory. The loneliness of his life was real, but the marriage feast of eternity will be greater. The sacrifices he made on earth were many, but the reward is eternal, for him and for you. If you hold on, if you stay faithful, if you keep your lamp burning, you will see the day when the bridegroom comes. And on that day, you will understand why he never married. Because his heart was always set on something greater. On you. So let me leave you with this. Jesus did not marry because his love was too vast for one person. He did not raise children because his family would stretch across the nations. He did not leave a bloodline because his legacy would be eternal. He gave up what was small so he could give you what is infinite. And now the question rests with you. Will you love him back? Will you live for him? Will you stay faithful until the day he returns for his bride? The choice is yours, and eternity waits for your answer. Before we end, I want to leave you with one last thing. YouTube does not show this video to others unless you help it. And right now, the devil will whisper to you, don't bother, don't like, don't subscribe, don't comment. But if you love Jesus, if you truly follow him, then don't listen to that voice. Say no to temptation. Say yes to faith. Click like, because it tells YouTube this message matters. Click subscribe so you don't miss the truth we uncover together. And write a comment, even just Jesus, I love you, because it spreads light in a dark world. If you love him, you will do it. If you follow the devil, you'll accept his whisper and stay silent. The choice is yours. Stand with Jesus today.